Welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today I'm going to do a brief review of Pulp Alley by Pulp Alley Games. So let's get started. Any of you who have been followers of my page for any length of time will know that I've already done a review of Pulp Alley. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. In fact, I'm going to make a crass commercial. So I should probably begin by stating that when I first created this page, one of my purposes has always been to try to support and bring attention to those independent games and less common games that I'm particularly fan of. I'm also using it to find some new games that I wasn't aware of, but mostly I've been using it to support the games that I enjoy and I enjoy playing. But never have I done anything quite as outright commercially as what I'm about to do now, and that is I'm about to advertise Pulp Alley. Now, I should probably begin by mentioning that I'm not getting any sort of feedback. I'm not getting free merchandise. I'm not getting money. In fact, Dave Phipps, my friend and the writer of this game, doesn't even know that I'm making this video. I'm making it because I do enjoy it, Pulp Alley. I think it's a very, very game and it's very useful. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that and how it could be useful to you. But I'm presenting it right now because Pulp Alley at present has a Kickstarter. It's going to end in just a few days. I'm going to try to get this video up very, very quickly so you can see it as soon as possible before that Kickstarter ends, because we're getting close. I think there's only a week left of it now when I'm filming this. And this new Kickstarter, he's done a couple Kickstarters in the past, but this one is basically a starter set, a starter box set of the game. So if you were ever interested in getting into Pulp Alley and getting started to play this game, this is certainly a good opportunity. The Kickstarter comes with the rules, it comes with all the basic cards you need, it comes with dice to play the game, it comes with the markers, it even comes with 2 beginning leagues and the cards for those leagues. So everything you need, except for your terrain really, to get started playing the game. So, what is Pulp Alley and why am I suggesting it to you so fervently? Pulp Alley is designed to be, as the name would imply, a pulp game. You can use it to play any of the standard pulp genres that you're used to. It's designed around playing 1930s Indiana Jones sort of things, with archaeologists in the jungle or in the deserts. It can be used to play gangland stuff in the 20s or the 30s in urban environments. And by that, I mean either just normal gangster detectives and bad guys or the more masked crusader sort of games. It also can cover any of that retro science fiction that you would expect, things like Flash Gordon or Cowboys and Wild West. Now, this is all just the basic game as it stands and is written and designed. The brilliance of the game, in my mind, is there's a whole lot more than you can do with that. The game relies on a series of cards that are used during the game to help make your perils happen and some of your challenges to occur. But there's a version of those are the normal fortune cards. I have some just here. These are fortune cards, and they're used to give various events to represent dangers that happen in the game or to give slight advantages that you might be able to take advantage of against your opponent. But because of that mechanic, they've created an additional system that works to help expand to other genres. So one of them, not exactly a genre difference, but the first one I want to show you is the solo deck. The solo deck sort of replaces the fortune decks if you're playing a solo game and allows it to be played, as I say, with a solo game, with driving the enemy AI characters. So suddenly you have a very good pulp game that can also now be played with either 2 to 4 players in a normal environment or as a solo game. Similarly, I don't have it here in front of me, but there's a horror deck which can turn it into a pulp horror game. And those decks are all extra, and they do require a slight bit more expense to get started. There's also expansions to all the normal decks for the game. The game can be used to play almost anything. A friend of mine in England does all of his historic miniatures skirmish wargaming using these rules, regardless of whether they're pulp or whether they're meant to be more historical. And you can just do that by altering the stats and the skills, not really the stats, but the skills that you give your characters. There's weapon kits, and the basic rules, your weapons are either missile weapons or hand-to-hand weapons. But by using the rules or by using the predetermined rule sets already created by his weapon kits, you can mimic weapons if that's more what you want. If you were doing a World War II game, you might not just want generic weapon, so you might call all the rifles the basic shoot, and then you might use the pistol kit to reduce the range if you're firing with a Luger, or use the blast if you're firing a Panzerfaust, or use the burst template to be a flamethrower, for instance. So you can start adjusting for the periods of games you want, and you can have is Hollywood a sort of feel. Remember, I said it's a pulp game. It's built to have that sort of Hollywood feel, but you can actually reduce that if you want and have a far more historical environment, as long as you're still being built on a model of just a handful of characters on either side. I think this rules are incredibly brilliant on that. And I think my favorite example and the biggest extreme I've done with it is back during the 100th anniversary of World War I, my club entered into a plan, which we mostly did, of running each year for each of the 100th anniversaries of the different years of that war. We ran a war game at our local convention of a battle, a circumstance that happened in World War I. And I actually ended up taking mine to little extremes. I ran mine several times over and over again, continually trying to find a better rule system to use. And the battle I was using was the Battle of Lake Tanganyika. Lake Tanganyika, it's in the middle of Africa, and it was this really strange affair with very small boats of naval engagement with basically motorboats. I ran the game, I think, 5 or 6 different times using different rules, and in the end, the best and most enjoyable version of the game was when I finally thought, hey, why don't we try it with Pulp Alley? And we converted it over to Pulp Alley using the vehicle rules and treating each of the boats as the various vehicles. And then each of the crews of those boats was a league on its own. So it was a multiplayer game with leagues working as allies with one another. It was a lot of fun. Far more historical, I would argue, than it was Pulp. The game rules worked admirably for it. I've also used it for cowboy games in a similar fashion. Not Hollywood-type cowboys, but more realistic, historic cowboy games. So brilliant how flexible it is. And this is beyond what they advertise, what Dave advertised it as. So I think this game has an endless amount of options and choices. A friend of mine runs Firefly, the TV series. He runs a Firefly campaign with it. So there's a bunch of places where you can stretch it that are beyond the obvious. This game is incredibly well supported. There's a number of, as I mentioned, decks, but there's add-ons you can buy to keep revising them. Dave has his own Pulp Alley YouTube channel, and that shows gameplays, it shows how to build terrain. It's starting now to go into details about some of his pre-generated characters. And he also airs actual pulp fiction, pulp movies from the period to help get you a feel for the pulp genre. So that channel itself is great, but beyond that, he has a Facebook page, there's a forum, he's very quick to answer questions. Just recently he did a Discord live stream with one of the other YouTube channels with Travis at Combat CP to help teach him the rules. I mean, how supportive of a game can you be? And Dave is just great at this. So very good amount of support for the game. There's been, for the last couple of years, he's been coming out with new scenarios each month. Again, brilliant. And usually those scenarios at the end of the year, he'll bind them together in a book and sell them all together if you want to go that route. So a lot of opportunity for the game. The game itself uses a series of different stats that are based upon dice. It uses multiple dice rolls with different types of dice and different numbers representing your abilities. You might have 4d8 that you roll, for instance. The success numbers are always the same, but most of your modifiers add or reduce dice. The characters are all written up on cards. I sort of hinted a moment ago that there's a number of pre-generated characters, and the starter kit comes with some, but it is incredibly easy to write your own characters. The rules tell you how to do that. And if you want official-looking cards, there's even templates available on the Facebook page. I've got my own template that I use for my own cards, but you can You can even create cards that look the same as the other ones. And so you're not stuck with the cards that are pre-generated, but you have those pre-generated if you don't want to bother creating characters. So again, brilliant. Now those numbers I mentioned, your stats, as you take damage, your stats will alter and change. Let's say, I think I gave an example of saying 48. So if you have a stat that's 48, if you take an injury, the die type drops. So you'll go to 46. So you're losing some of the effectiveness of your fight. The more fights you're in a turn, you'll start losing dice to fight back because you're concentrating your efforts in different places. So it simulates that really, really well. It's surprisingly realistic game, considering its background is as pulp. And it's a really fun mechanic, that whole dice thing. The cards just add to additional choices of tactics that you can make, but they also cause a sort of randomness. They represent some of the dangers. Like in a World War II game, for instance, the card might represent traps or minefields. They might represent natural occurrences. In fact, these cards generally, let's give you an example. One of the things that confuses people often new to the game is the cards have multiple functions. The very first, like this particular card, the first thing it says is raise the stakes. Play immediately, place this card face up near the table until the end of the scenario. The effect, the winner of the scenario gains an additional backup point, +1 backup point, in addition to other rewards. What that really means, this is a card for a campaign game, and it gives you additional resources, an additional backup point to hire more backup figures or characters in your next game. I would argue that first part of the card is really what's meant when they call it a fortune card. You receive a number of these cards throughout the game, and you hold them in a hand, and that is something you would use then, and that you could play. Well, this one's played in immediately, but typically they'll be like, you can cause an opponent to break his leg, and it slows down his speed or something. That's the top half of the card. The bottom half of this card says challenge, cunning, or might. That is how it's used in apparel, or how it's used to determine things like I was just saying, how to deal with a trap or things that come up. It doesn't say what those traps are or what those things are. It just says challenge, cunning, or might, and there's a number here, 2, which means that you have to have 2 successes in either your cunning or your might to be successful with this. So it would be up to you, for the narrative purpose, to decide what that really means game-wise. If it's cunning or might, this could be that you found a trap that you either can use your intelligence and your trickery to figure out how to circumvent the trap, or your might to break the trap. So if you want to keep the narrative really going to its best and get the best out of the game, there is a little creativity. If you just want to play the game, you don't ever have to describe what that means at all. Something's come up, you've used your cunning or your might, you choose which one's the best, and you roll, you see if you work it. So you can do it either way. But that's another way you might want to use it if you were doing a historic game. To connect it better is to describe them in a way. Some of these cards, in one game set in the desert, you could determine that you've fallen into a pit of rattlesnakes. And in a World War II more historic game, you might have found a minefield. So that's part of why it's so easy to adjust. It does take a little more creativity, perhaps, to adjust this to other things. But if you have that creativity and you apply some thought to it, it can do almost everything. I feel like I've really gone a long time for a video that's not really showing you we're doing anything. It's a video that I'm really viewing as sort of an extra video. So I'm going to bring this to an end right now. But I do want to let you know that I'm a big fan of this game. I think everybody should try it. I think it's mainstay of the independent tabletop miniatures world. And if you haven't played it, you really should. This is a great opportunity to try it. If you have any questions, or if you have this game yourself and you enjoy playing Pulp Alley, go ahead and make comments down below. Also, if you have further ideas for other content you'd like to see us present here on Cry Havoc Wargaming, we of course look for those in the comments down below as well. If you have found this content or this video at all useful or have enjoyed it, I hope you'll hit like. And if you'd like to continue to receive notifications regarding this or other videos that might give you an idea how to better spend your money or time in your wargaming hobby, then please hit subscribe and ring our bell. Until next time, cheers.